A story of silence. But listen closely. Connecting minds. Connecting from Africa for the world.
Let's play a quick game. Open your news app, scroll through the headlines. A celebrity divorce, another AI breakthrough. Stocks dipped 1.3%. A politician said something dumb. Again. Now pause. You probably didn't see this. 2 of the world's poorest countries made a deal. No middlemen, no permission, no press. Burkina Faso and Bangladesh signed a direct trade agreement. Raw cotton for textile output, infrastructure exchange, and long-term cooperation. Sounds boring, right? But here's the twist. That deal may be one of the most important global economic moves of this decade, and you didn't even hear about it. Why? Because we're trained to look where the light is brightest, not where the real shift is happening. We watch G7 summits like they're rock concerts. We analyze every IMF statement like scripture. But when 2 countries no one paid attention to quietly opt out of the default system, silence. And maybe that silence is the story. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just disconnects. No protest, no flag, no fire. Just, we don't need your format anymore. And that's what Burkina Faso did. They didn't shout. They acted. In a world obsessed with visibility, that's what makes it revolutionary. And look, I get it. You might be thinking, how does this matter to me? You're not from West Africa, you're not in trade, you're just trying to get through your week. But here's why it matters. This story isn't about cotton, it's about control. Who sets the rules? Who writes the script? And what happens when someone quietly walks off stage and builds their own set? Because if it can happen once, it can happen again. And that makes people very, very nervous. So let's rewind. Slow it down. And look at what the headlines missed, and what they probably wanted you to miss. Because in the dry heat of Burkina Faso, something grew. And it wasn't just cotton. Let's stop calling it a failure. Let's stop pretending the reason places like Burkina Faso struggled for decades is because something went wrong. Because truth is, nothing went wrong. The system worked, just not for them. It worked for the consultants flying in and out of Ouagadougou, racking up per diem while telling farmers how to diversify outputs. It worked for the development agencies writing 80-page policy memos full of buzzwords no one on the ground ever reads. It worked for the lenders, the exporters, the middlemen, the certification boards, the NGOs, the logistics brokers, and the institutions that only show up when there's something left to skim off the top. Because the plan was never to fix the problem. The plan was to manage it, permanently. See, dependency isn't an accident, it's an asset. Every time a country can't process its own crops, someone else gets to offer a solution. Every time a country waits for trade approvals, someone else gets to write the rules. Every time a farmer sells raw, someone else sells finished and pockets the difference. It's not inefficient. It's elegant. A machine designed to keep value moving upstream, out of the soil, across the ocean, and straight into markets that never planted a seed. Burkina Faso is just one gear in that engine. Grow the cotton, ship it raw, hope it sells. Repeat. Meanwhile, Bangladesh built a $45 billion garment industry off that same raw material. Meanwhile, France collected more in tariffs from African imports than it gave in aid. Meanwhile, institutions with names like Global Trade Equity Council kept hosting summits to talk about inclusive development. You seeing the pattern yet? Because when Burkina Faso stepped out, signed a deal directly with Bangladesh, no foreign advisors, no technical partner, no third-party validation, they didn't just cut out inefficiency. They cut off oxygen to an entire dependency economy. An economy that doesn't show up on GDP charts. An economy built on your country's inability to say, no thanks, we'll handle it ourselves. And now that Burkina did, there's a quiet panic. Not because the deal was dangerous, but because it proved the machine was never required in the first place. And that's the part no one wants to admit. Because if one country walks out and the world doesn't collapse, others might start checking the door. You know what made the Burkina-Bangladesh deal dangerous? Not the cotton, not the contract, not even the economics. It was the fact that it happened quietly. No Western cosign, no Paris backdrop, no white-gloved handshakes or technical assistance logos on the podium. Just two countries, long ignored, long underestimated, looking each other in the eye and saying, "We don't need anyone's template for this. Let's build our own." And they did. On paper, it's simple. Burkina Faso ships raw cotton directly. Bangladesh supplies machinery, training, and guaranteed offtake for processed goods. They build joint storage infrastructure. They coordinate logistics. They set their own terms. No third-party arbitration, no waiting period, no approval stamp from Brussels, Washington, or Geneva. That right there? That's the threat. Because what the old system fears most isn't noise, it's function. See, for decades, trade deals in the global south had a rhythm. You negotiate, then wait. You submit your readiness assessment, you hire an international advisor, you follow compliance checklists, and maybe, just maybe, you get the green light. It was never really a partnership. It was a filtering process, a way to make sure nothing moved unless the right people got to touch it first. Burkina and Bangladesh, they skipped all that. And by doing so, they didn't just trade cotton, they traded position. They stopped acting like junior players and started acting like sovereigns. Not because they had more power, but because they stopped acting like they had none. And here's where it hits hard. This wasn't built to provoke, it wasn't even built to inspire. It was built to work, to move goods, create value, cut time, grow wealth, without waiting for the world to notice or approve. And that makes it more dangerous than any protest, because it proves the unthinkable. You don't have to burn the system down. You can just walk out the side door and build your own hallway. You know how you can tell something real is happening? People stop calling it amazing. They start calling it normal. And that's exactly what began unfolding across Burkina Faso. Not with press releases, not with numbers, but in the way people behaved. Take this. 3 months after the deal kicked in, a roadside mechanic in Tenkadogo was asked why business had doubled. He didn't talk about trade. He said, more tractors, more work, more breakdowns. Simple. That's what real change looks like, when mechanics get busy because farmers can finally afford machines. A new rhythm took shape. Farmers started organizing deliveries around actual schedules, not hope. Transporters began running fixed routes because they knew there was product to move, not just maybe. At a market in Kudugu, vendors started renting cold boxes together, low cost, pooled use, no middlemen. Now tomatoes didn't have to be sold by 3 p.m. or thrown out. They lasted until Thursday. That changes everything. And it wasn't just food, it was mindset. People who used to wait 6 months for subsidized seed started buying directly from the new agro-input hubs set up through the Bangladesh tech package. Why wait for bureaucracy when the co-op's supply comes on time? And here's the moment everything flipped. In one rural council meeting, a local elder stood up and asked the government rep, "If we figured out how to coordinate our own trade, why are we still asking for NGO approvals on fertilizer?" The room went quiet, because once people taste working systems, they stop romanticizing help. They start doing math. They ask harder questions. They stop giving politicians applause for showing up. They start giving them deadlines. And schools caught on too. A high school in Ouahgouya turned its civic education class into a debate club. Should the state manage all processing industries, or should co-ops take the lead? Should young people train for public sector jobs or become logistics entrepreneurs? That's not theory, that's a signal. Even the music changed. One rapper from Fada dropped a line. "We used to ship cotton and watch it vanish. Now we track the batch and own the label." It went viral, not because it rhymed, but because it was real. That's when you know the shift isn't surface level. It's creeping into language, into humor, into default thinking. The kind of change that doesn't scream, it settles. Quiet, heavy, permanent. You know things are shifting when the government has no idea why there's suddenly more traffic outside the Ministry of Trade. They didn't announce a reform, they didn't fund a program, they didn't even tweet a photo op. But trucks started lining up, crop prices stabilized, and local workshops began hiring again, without a single press release. It didn't come from the top, it came from the side. Startups, tech kids, hustlers, old traders, everyone who had been told to wait their turn suddenly realized, maybe the turn never comes unless you build it yourself. A young mechanic outside Bobo started converting old tuk-tuks into field delivery carts. By month 3, he couldn't keep up with demand. Co-ops were asking for batches of 10. One tech group in Kudugu launched a dirt-simple logistics app. No map, just radio frequency tagging and SMS. It worked. Farmers called it our version of DHL. Then came the trainers. Private centers offered one-week crash courses in warehouse management, not funded by NGOs, funded by the farmer groups themselves. And guess who showed up late to the party? The state. Officials started monitoring developments they never initiated. Some even claimed credit in interviews. That's when the debate sparked. Do we still need the ministry to lead industrialization? If citizens build the network, what's the role of government now, referee or parasite? Is this the beginning of a market-led sovereignty? Hard questions, long overdue. Because while ministries were busy drafting 5-year plans, the market moved in 5-week bursts. Real money, real motion, real ownership. And this is the uncomfortable part. People stopped asking for permission, and things got better. Faster services, smarter coordination, less corruption, because there was no one to bribe. Even local banks, usually slow as stone, started offering pre-harvest bundles based on peer-verified data. Risk dropped, lending shot up. By quarter 2, one regional co-op reported a 38% income jump compared to the previous year. Not because of state subsidies, because of momentum. And now people are asking, if all this is happening without the state, what exactly are we paying taxes for? Dangerous question, the kind that makes suits nervous, the kind that spreads, because once a system works without the usual players, the players become optional. At first, nobody said anything, not officially, no editorials, no warnings, just silence. But behind that silence, movement. In Niger, a delegation quietly flew to Ouagadougou, no press, no banner, just 6 men in plain suits asking a lot of smart questions. In Sierra Leone, a mid-level trade official leaked a memo suggesting we should explore direct cotton exchange corridors, no third party needed. And in Kenya, a think tank director published a blog, not in a journal, not on TV, just a blog. Burkina is no longer an outlier, it's a test case. If they can do it without IMF frameworks, why are we still writing grant proposals? That's when the institutions noticed. And they started to sweat. Because the biggest threat to any system isn't loud rebellion. It's quiet replication. No flags, no protests. Just other countries watching and doing the math. What did they skip? How risky was it really? What if we don't wait for permission either? It's hard to control ideas once they go practical. A Ugandan MP reportedly asked in session, how long do we keep applying for food security aid when Burkina is exporting surplus with no central oversight? And in Europe? The tone changed. One policy brief warned of decentralized models lacking strategic coordination. Translation, we're not running the show and that makes us nervous. Another EU analyst asked bluntly, if bilateral trade models spread, what happens to the multilateral order? That's the fear no one wants to say out loud. This isn't anti-West, it's post-West. Not a protest, a pivot. And pivots are dangerous because they don't ask permission. So now you've got finance ministries watching each other. You've got youth movements quoting Burkina in forums. You've got chambers of commerce drawing maps that don't center on Europe anymore. And slowly the question is shifting. Not should we follow them, but why haven't we already? That's what a working model does. It flips the burden of proof. And once that happens, every delay sounds like an excuse. The pushback didn't come like you'd expect. No public denouncements, no sanctions, no speeches. Just friction. Sudden, subtle, strategic friction. First, a development loan meant for a road expansion in Burkina got delayed. Nothing official. Just additional documentation required. Then a cross-border payment hub in Ghana mysteriously removed Burkina from its pilot list. No explanation, just logistical complications. A research grant for agricultural innovation, one Burkina University had already been shortlisted for, quietly disappeared. And the embassies? They began asking clarifying questions. Not about corruption, not about compliance, about alignment. Are these trade models harmonized with regional frameworks? How will transparency be ensured without multilateral oversight? Are you open to strategic feedback from key development partners? Let's translate that. We see what you're doing, and we're not thrilled. Because once a country skips the choreography, no donor conference, no Western consultancy, no flagship NGO, it exposes something uncomfortable. How unnecessary some of those things might have always been. And that cannot go unpunished. So the pushback wasn't a punch, it was a temperature drop. Meetings got colder, replies got slower. Praise got replaced with caution. Support turned into ongoing review. One official in Burkina said privately, "It's like they're not mad, just disappointed, but in a way that costs us real money." That's how power works when it wants to stay polite. Because if the system attacked directly, it would admit the threat was real. But if it stalls you quietly, it keeps control without giving you a headline. And here's the twisted part. The more Burkina succeeded, the more isolated it became. Not because of failure, because of proof. Proof that their success didn't need the usual signatures, and that, to the old guard, is the biggest betrayal of all. At first, there was pride. Then came the whispers. Why is our aid money late? Why did the infrastructure deal stall? Why are we suddenly the outlier in every meeting? People started to wonder, is this punishment? Did we go too far? Not everyone agreed. Some said, this is the price of sovereignty. Others said, this is arrogance dressed as independence. And suddenly the air felt different. Inside Parliament, debates got sharper. A coalition MP asked, if international funding shrinks, do we have a fallback or just slogans? In private business circles, some exporters started hedging, reopening talks with European brokers they'd just cut off 3 months ago. Because when the old system tightens, not everyone has the stomach to wait it out. Even farmers who first cheered the direct model started feeling it. One shipment delayed, one payment stuck, one storage unit without parts. Not collapse, but friction. Enough to shake belief. And that's when the split became clear. Those who saw this as a test of strength, and those who saw it as proof of recklessness. A university professor summed it up on a radio show. Do we want liberation that's fragile or dependency that's stable? That's the crack the old world wanted, because once doubt creeps in, not through force but through real inconvenience, a movement can eat itself. Some ministers began suggesting a hybrid approach. Some foreign advisors got invited back, quietly. It wasn't a reversal, not yet, but it was a retreat, measured, strategic, nervous. And on the streets, people noticed. One shopkeeper put it bluntly, they told us we didn't need help anymore, but now we're asking for it again, just more politely. That's the risk of early independence. It looks brave on paper, but on the ground, it feels lonely. And no one wants to be the hero of a model that stalls in year 2. So now Burkina Faso stands at a quieter crossroads, not between success and failure, between courage and caution. And whichever way they go, others are watching. At first they smirked, then they ignored it, then they stalled it. Now? They're studying it. Burkina Faso's direct trade model, once dismissed as naive, is suddenly turning up in PowerPoints across Brussels, Washington, Kigali, Delhi. Not in bold letters, not with logos, but buried in footnotes, in side-slide analysis, labeled as emerging alternatives in low infrastructure contexts. Translation? This thing works and we didn't invent it. In a closed-door forum hosted by a major European policy institute, an attendee leaked one chilling line. If we can't guide these models, we need to at least map how fast they're spreading. That's not curiosity, that's containment. Because here's the quiet panic. What happens if more countries realize they don't need our frameworks to function? The system isn't afraid of chaos, it's afraid of order outside its jurisdiction. And that's what Burkina offered. A clean deal, a working logistics spine, tangible GDP movement without external monitoring, and for once no one could claim credit. No thanks to our support, no this aligns with our regional strategy, just 2 nations that didn't wait, that broke the game. Now think tanks are scrambling. Some call it contextual autonomy. Others label it disruptive non-aligned economics. All jargon. The truth? The rules got rewritten without the people who usually hold the pen. Even business publications are inching toward it. One headline in an African Economic Digest read, Burkina model, fluke or prototype. That's the most dangerous place a small idea can land, between anomaly and repeatable. Because the moment someone asks, what if we tried this? The center shakes. And the question becomes not whether it's ideal, but whether it's enough to be dangerous. And if it is, then maybe the old models weren't as necessary as we thought. Maybe they were just familiar. You probably won't see Burkina Faso trending. There won't be documentaries, no Netflix series, no glowing editorial from The Economist. But that was never the point. Because this isn't a story that was written for applause. It was written in trade routes, in shipment logs, in bank transfers that didn't need translation. And maybe that's the real win. Not the headlines, not the hashtags, but the fact that something shifted and didn't ask anyone to clap. Because here's what makes the Burkina model dangerous. It doesn't claim to be revolutionary. It just refuses to be irrelevant. No slogans, no manifestos, just, we'll do it our way. We'll take our shot. And if it works, we'll keep going. That's not noise. That's velocity. And you know what scares people more than rebellion? Proof. Proof that you can build a different road. Proof that nothing burned down when you did. Proof that you didn't need the script. They just needed you to believe you did. Now, other countries are watching. Other planners are listening. Other citizens are whispering, why not us? And maybe that's all it takes. Not a megaphone, not a protest, just a quiet refusal to wait for permission. And a walk toward the exit.